In principle, if the confinement in lateral direction, confinement stress in lateral direction, is less than 15% of the compressive strength and the uniaxial strength loading, although you have lateral confinement stress, but when the concrete fell, it's fell similar to concrete and the uniaxial strength, or uniaxial loading. So basically you have a concrete splitting failure. But if you have a high confinement pressure, so basically you apply the compressive loads, in this direction you concrete have actually expand, right? But when you apply a confinement stress, so concrete won't be able to expand, right? So that increases the strength substantially. So at a very high confinement stress, so basically concrete fail by crushing. So in a concrete, ordinary concrete, let's say in ordinary uniaxial compressive loading, you only have about 50, 60 megapascal, right? So if you have a confinement stress of 30 megapascal in lateral direction here, you have a compressive strength almost 200. Okay? So basically, the concrete and the triaxial compressive loading condition, the strength and the strain increase substantially. Next, I want to talk about the factors influence the strength. So what kind of factors influence the strength? So in previous class, when I talked about concrete in the mixed design, I mentioned in ordinary concretes, water to cement ratio is the most important parameter which influences the strength. In ordinary concrete, aggregate strength is not a consideration. So let's take a look at this graph here. Okay? So X here is water to cement ratio, Y here is the compressive strength. So in principle, with the reduction of the water to cement ratio, the strength will be increased, right? However, this is based on the assumption that although you have a low water cement ratio, you need to compact the concrete properly. If you reduce the water to cement ratio, the workability is affected. If you're not able to compact concrete properly, for example, you have this kind of a situation, then low water cement ratio does not help you. It will not reach high, it will not allow high strength to be reached. So this is the dashed line here, okay? So although you have a low water cement ratio, but due to the incomplete compaction, it does not lead to the high strength concrete. So with the availability of a plasticizing admixture and a super plasticizer, nowadays we are able to make concrete with a very low water cement ratio, but still good workability. So that allows us to cast the concrete properly. So therefore, when you reduce the water to cement ratio with the use of a super plasticizer, you can increase the strength of a concrete. So a couple of things I want to mention. In ordinary concretes, we talked about earlier, the interface transition zone is the weakest link in the concrete. So therefore, when you have the with this kind of a situation, there is a relationship between the strength and water to cement ratio. So this is in low to medium strength of the concrete. So I talked about if you reduce the water to cement ratio, or if you use some fine mineral admixture, you can improve this interface transition zone substantially. So when we improve this interface transition zone substantially, you can see that even when you reduce the water cement ratio slightly, the increase of the strength can be significant. Okay, so the relationship between the compressive strength and water cement ratio is not linear. So at a lower strength, so lower water cement ratio, that range, even a small reduction in the water cement ratio, due to the improvement of cement paste and improvement in the interface, which allows the better bonding between the aggregate and the cement paste, the strength improvement is more substantial compared with at high water cement ratio. So in high strength, okay, in high strength concrete, okay, so before the limit of the aggregate is reached, small reduction of water cement ratio can lead to higher increase in the compressive strength. So if the strength of the aggregate is reached, then the cracker will go through the aggregates. So in this kind of situation, if you have the aggregate limit is reached, no matter what you do, no matter how low water cement ratio you want to achieve, this is not going to affect the strength of a concrete, because aggregate becomes the governing factor. Okay, so this one we will talk about later on when I talk about a high strength class, high strength concretes. The other thing which influences the strength is pH. In general, with the continued moisture curing, so we know that the strength increase. So in general, at the job site, oftentimes people are not, you cannot wait until 28 days. So at the early stage, you're hoping to get some feelings at the age of 28 days, what you can achieve of your concrete. So as a general rule, roughly about 28-day strength versus 7-day strength, the ratio is about 1.3 to 1.7, usually less than 1.5. The ratio between the 28-day strength and 7-day strength, it's depending on the strength level. Okay. So when you have a low water, when you have the ordinary concrete, the ratio between this range is valid. But when you are dealing with high strength concretes, at 7 days you can get a very high strength. So beyond the 7 days, even you provide a moisture curing, but the increase may not be significant. Okay. So one thing is that aggregator can be a limit, a governing factor. Okay, so this is one thing. The other thing is that when we're dealing with a high strength concrete, right? So you have a low water cement ratio. Even if you provide a moisture curing, we talk about, one thing is that when you have a water cement ratio below a certain level, not all cement can be hydrated, right? So this is one thing. The other thing is that when you have a low water cement ratio, early stage, when you provide a moisture curing, very limited, a few days of moisture curing can make a concrete fairly dense. So in this kind of situation, even if you put your specimen in moisture curing room with the dense structures, the curing water cannot penetrate into the concrete easily. So therefore, when you're dealing with a high strength concrete, the ratio between the 28 days strength and 7 days strength may not be, you know, or in other words, these strength will be closer, right? So the value, it's actually lower than 1.3. The other thing I want to talk about is curing condition. So when we talk about curing condition, so basically temperature and relative humidity. So first let's talk about temperature. So in general, we talk about temperature increase, rate of hydration, cement hydration increase, right? So with the increase the rate of the cement hydration, at the early stage, the strength will be increased, right? However, on the longer term, the increase, the early curing temperature may not be benefit. So let's take a look at these few graphs here. So this one here, the X here is curing temperature, Y here is the compressive strength. So you can see that at the age of 1 day, with the increase of the curing temperature, the strength increase. Okay, so this is fairly easy to understand. So with the increase of curing temperature, you have a higher rate of cement hydration. As a result, the strength is higher. But the question is, why at the age of 28 days, with the increase of a curing temperature, your strength will be actually lower? So this is actually similar to the different type of the cement we talked about earlier. So earlier I've talked about type 4 cement, low heat cement, and type 3 rapid hardening cement, right? So I talked about when you use the rapid hardening cement to making concrete, early strength is higher, but the longer term strength might be lower compared with the concrete made with the ordinary Portland cement concrete. So I explained to you that the reason it's related to the homogeneity of the distribution of the hydration products, right? So this is the thing. The other thing I've also mentioned in previous class, where we talk about accelerating admixture and retarding admixture, right? So when you have accelerating admixtures, early strength is higher, but the longer term strength is lower. So when you have a retarding admixture, although the early strength is lower, but the longer term, so it allows you more homogeneous distribution of hydration products. Okay. So the temperature have the same effect. Okay. This is compared with accelerating and retarding admixture and rapid hardening cement and low heat cement. So from that perspective, concrete cured in tropic climate can be expected to have a high early strength, but lower ultimate strength. But this is the environment we live in. It's nothing you can do about it, right? So we just design the concrete to achieve, to design a dense concrete if the concrete is intended to be used in severe environments. On the contrary, if the concrete is cast in colder climates, okay, so although the early strength is lower, but the longer term strength, if you provide continued moisture curing, so it can be achieved, the longer term strength. So basically these are some of the information here. So how the higher temperature, okay, affect the early strength and longer term strength, and if you have a low strength, how this affects the longer term strength. Okay, so I will let you look at these curves. So the next thing is actually in terms of curing, it's the relative humidity in the environment. So we talk about concrete strength development rely on cement hydration, right? So if you have a dry out, if the cement does not hydrate, then the strength will not increase. So the thing is, when the concrete it's dried out, okay, so if the relative humidity in capillary is less than 80% of the relative humidity, then the cement hydration will cease. Okay? So this can happen in concrete when it's exposed to dry environments after 7 days of moisture curing. Okay? Let's say you have exposed to dry environment after initial moisture curing. Then you have concrete strength will not continue to develop if you don't have continued water supply for hydration. The other thing this is happened in sealed concrete or low water cement ratio concrete. I mentioned due to the low water cement ratio, even the initial very few days of curing can make a dense matrix, so the water cannot go in. So this graph here gives you some information how the moisture curing influences the strength development. So basically this solid line, okay, is the strength development of a concrete with a continued moisture curing. Okay? So then these dashed line, okay, so this one here, after the concrete is made, it's stored continuously in laboratory air. So without the provision of water or moisture curing, you can see that the strength is not increased. So initial strength development, so basically cement hydrates based on the water, mixing water you add into the concrete. When all these water used up and without provision of more water for curing, the strength is not increasing, right? Similar to these a few lines here. So this is for moisture curing for 3 days and for 7 days. So initially when you have a moisture curing, you have a water and the cement can hydrate, you have a strength increase. But after you take out from moisture curing when it's exposed to dry environments, and then when cement stops to hydrate, the strength will not increase. So the important thing is the curing age would only be beneficial to the strength development only if you have water available for cement hydration. If no water available, longer curing age will not have any benefit effect on the concrete strength development. The thing is, when we talk about the relative humidity, right? So the rate of water loss from the concrete after the casting, it's affected by a number of factors. Okay? So one thing is depending on the environment the concrete is in. Okay? For example, temperature, right? So if you have a high temperature, water is easy to evaporate. The other thing is relative humidity of the environment. If you have a dry environment, when relative humidity is low, then the water is easy to be lost to the environment. So this is the thing. So when you first cast the concrete, if it's, let's say, flat surface exposed to the environment where you have a high wind velocity, so that can also bring the water out. So these environmental factors will influence the rate of water loss from concrete. The other thing is actually related to the type of specimen. So if we have a thick specimen, the surface to volume ratio is low, then the surface exposed to the air is less. So in this kind of specimen, the rate of water loss is low. But if you have a thin specimen, so the surface to volume ratio is high, then the exposed surface is high, then the rate of water loss is high. So the rate of water loss from the environment are affected by the specimens, and also affected by the environment it is exposed in. So in general recommendation, ordinary concretes, 7 days moisture curing. So if you have a mineral admixture, the recommendation is that the longer moisture curing is desirable when you use the mineral admixture such as fly ash slag. So we learned in previous class because their reaction is one step behind cement hydration. So I want to talk about this moisture curing. For those of you who work on the job sites, years ago, in many of the situations, when we talk about moisture curing, they spray the water. Even the flat surface, rolled surface. So they cover, after the concrete casting, they cover the concrete with wet burlap, all right? And then the worker comes in the morning, spray the water. So this is traditionally done. But nowadays, when you go to job sites, oftentimes what you see people use is they call it curing membrane. So basically, this is sort of like a chemical substance sprayed on the concrete surface. So it does not provide water for cement hydration in a concrete curing. This curing membrane basically prevents the moisture loss from the concrete at the first few days. Right? So the difference is that in the spray, you have a water. Water can penetrate into the concrete through the voids. But when you use the curing membrane, it only prevents the moisture loss, but it does not provide the water. So these are the difference. Because depending on the type of the situation, this is important. The other thing which influences the strength is the cement. So we talked about strength development earlier. We talked about water to cement ratio is important, right? The second actually important thing related to the cement is degree of cement hydration. So if you have more cement hydrated, you have more hydration products. These hydration products will occupy space originally occupied by the water. So reduce the porosity and increase the strength. So therefore, the porosity of hydrated cement paste is determined by two things: water to cement ratio and degree of cement hydration. So in general, we talk about in previous class. So when you use different type of the cement to making concrete, so at the age of 90 days at the age of 90 days, the difference is not significant. But when you use different type of Portland cement to making concrete, it affects the early strength and also sometimes affects the longer term strength. So hydration rate of cement. So if we talk about Portland cement, type 3 is greater than 1, 2, 5, and 4. Okay. So when we talk about blended cement, right? So Portland cement type 1, the rate of cement hydration at a normal temperature is greater than blended cement where you have pozzolanic materials and slag. Talking about a blended cement, so one of the things I want to mention to recap some of the things I talked about in previous class. So in previous class, I've talked about the fly ash, slag, and silica fume. These are the industrial byproducts which commonly used in concrete, right? So when you use fly ash and slag, because their particle size are similar to average particle cement paste, so usually they retard the rate of strength gain. So however, if you can provide a moisture curing with a pozzolanic reaction, the longer term strength can be even higher compared with the concrete without these mineral admixture. The thing is that I want to emphasize the difference between the silica fume compared with the fly ash or slag. Although silica fume is also a pozzolanic material, but due to its extremely fine size, it's increased the strength even at the same water cement ratio as Portland cement. So basically a few effects. Because of this extremely fine size of the silica fume, it has a filler effect, right? It fills the space between cement particles. Because of its size, it's 100 times smaller compared with the average cement particle. The other thing is the pozzolanic reactions, right? SiO2 in the silica fume react with the calcium hydroxide from cement hydration. You have more calcium silicate hydrates, right? And the third thing, it's actually improve the interface transition zone. Okay? So these are the benefits. When you use the silica fume in concrete, even at an early stage, the strength oftentimes it's not affected. The reason is that when you have a fine materials, like silica fume added into the concrete, it may accelerate the rate of cement hydration. So therefore, the thing is that in this perspective, silica fume is different to fly ash. Okay. And in terms of the chemical admixtures, so we talked about in previous class, water reducing admixtures and superplasticizers, right? How do they influence the strength? The other thing we mentioned, air entraining admixtures, right? So I talked about in general, with the increase in the air voids in the concrete, the strength will be reduced, right? So rule of thumb, so when you have an increase in 1% of air, okay, entrained air, the strength will be reduced roughly about 5%. Okay, so this is in general. However, let's take a look at this graph here. So this graph, X here is the cement content, okay. Y here is the compressive strength. Okay. So you have three lines here. So this one is the 0% entrained air. So you have 4% and 6% entrained air. Okay. So ordinary concrete, okay, so let's say we have a cement content of 370 or 380 kilo per cubic meter of concrete. So you can see that with the increase of entrained air content, the strength is reduced, right? But when you look